Welcome to another episode of Mission Compliance, Unleashing Growth Potential for Defense Contractors. In today's episode, we continue down the road of understanding CMMC, its regulations, and controls. Up next is AC L2-3.1.20. Verify and control / limit connections to and use of external systems. That's a mouthful. We'll break down what this control means, why it matters, and how it impacts your organization's cybersecurity posture. We'll also provide practical insights and strategies for achieving compliance and securing your systems effectively. So whether you're a defense contractor aiming to win more contracts or simply someone interested in bolstering your cybersecurity knowledge, you're in the right place. You know what comes next. We're joined once again today by Mike Frieder, President of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC Professional Assessor. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman.
We're on Control 3.1.20, which means we're almost finally done with the first
Yay!
control family. The first of 14. We will be here for a while. Hope you're not sick of us yet. So, Mike, this week we're talking about external connections. This control can be a difficult one too, given the extremely broad nature of this scenario. So with that being said, why is it important to limit connections and use of external systems?
It's a great question, Roman. This is a very interesting control because I think it's misunderstood quite a bit, and there's a lot of actually bad information. I was kind of looking at some material for this podcast before and was noticing that some of the folks on Reddit, and we love our Reddit fans, they just got it wrong. So I think the first thing to understand is that the first thing you have to do is you have to verify uh, what the external connections are or the external systems are that you're connecting to. So that's the first part. Then you have to control / limit those connections, right? So we have to have some level of control on what it is we're allowing users to connect to. And then we have to be able to limit those connections so that those connections are not just sort of open connections and anything can flow through those connections. It's a very interesting control because it really sets the limits on what it is that we're really supposed to have in place, ultimately resulting in the conclusion that you more or less really can't get away with having NIST SP 800-171 implemented without a firewall and probably without a SIEM solution as well. And you'll see that across some of our sample answers. But the idea here is number one, you should know what your users are connecting to and be able to trace back what they connected to if there's a problem. Number two is you shouldn't just allow users to do anything if that system's going to hold CUI. So we have to really dictate what are the rules of allowing a user to connect to things outside of our own local trusted network. And that's really what this control is all about. It's kind of the control that sets forth the tone that, look, you're going to need some kind of firewalling, some kind of control on the internet connection. You can't just connect anything out there. We want to put some bumpers on the sidelines, if you will. What are those things called? The bowling alley. The bumpers? Is that what they're called?
The bumpers.
Yeah. So we want to put some bumpers up for our users so they can't just do anything.
I won't reveal the age, but I can say that I used bumpers far too late into my bowling experience, and I'm still not very good at bowling. So you could say I might still need them. Um, but let's get right to the nitty gritty. What are the key assessment points on this one?
Yeah. By the way, there's no shame in using bumpers in life.
Hey,
Uh,
for a while, I don't know if you've ever seen them. I don't know if you've ever taken your kids or used them. They have those ramps. You've seen those ball ramps?
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I love the ramps. As a matter of fact, there's a bowling alley here in town that has like a dinosaur shaped ramp.
Nice.
Random fact. Yeah. Hey, look.
I love bowling, but I'm not good at it.
Yeah. Bowling's a tough sport. It's kind of like golf. Is a sport needed where you put a ball that small in a hole that far away? It's I don't know, it's just really extreme.
And do a lot of
It's
walking.
yeah, exactly. I mean, although the golf cart is cool, it's
Yeah.
nothing better than going out there and having a good cigar and a drink on a golf cart. I mean, I don't really need the game of golf to do that, but
And you can just pick any old chair inside your house.
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, assessment points. So, this is actually a pretty extensive control. There's one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know, I can't count. 6 assessment points on this one, and I have to tell you, that typically means it's pretty important when they have a lot of assessment points. They're really trying to figure out, are you doing the things you need to be doing? And so we'll kind of dive into these one by one. The first one is determine if connections to external systems are identified. How do you identify an external system, right? How does that work? In a sample plan, we put connections to external systems are identified via the organization's firewall, SIEM solution, and endpoint protection solution. So there may not necessarily be just one tool used to identify those external systems. The SIEM system is going to have logs of where you went to. The firewall is going to have logs of where you went to and what came in, what came out, etc. Also logs on what ports were there. And the endpoint protection solution, depending upon what's in your stack, the endpoint protection solution, what goes on your individual computers, that's probably going to have some sort of firewalling going on, but also it may have web filters. It may have, port and protocol control to it. So there could be quite a few things that can actually identify what you're connecting to. The next assessment point, determine if the use of external systems is identified. So again, if we're given a sample answer, we might say something like use of external systems is identified via the SIEM solution and firewall. By the way, if you're not familiar with what a SIEM solution is, it's a security information and event management tool. It essentially takes all the logs from all your devices, chews them up, and spits out relevant security alerts. Where applicable, if you will. So yeah, determine if the use of external systems is identified. Again, the reality here is that that is it can be identified using any of those tools. So we want to kind of list the relevant tools. One thing we love about ThreatLocker is its ability to individually identify what ports are actually in use when it's in learning mode, and then turn off access to those ports when it is not in learning mode. It's a huge help with that one. Next assessment point is to determine if connections to external systems are verified. So connections to external systems are verified by the firewall and the SIEM solution. So when we say verified, what does verified mean? Oftentimes, you can have spoofed URLs and spoofed network addresses. Do you have something where you can dig down and actually determine if those connections are verified and legitimate? Another great example is like HTTPS will throw a warning if the connection is not valid. That might be maybe even a better example than the one I just gave, which is, I'm sure everybody's done. If somebody's security certificate is expired, they may not be able to use it to verify those external connections. So we could also potentially put, hey, we have a block on any connection where the security certificate is invalid. That is absolutely a possibility in various endpoint management solutions. Next assessment point is to determine if the use of external systems is verified. Connections to external systems are verified by the firewall and SIEM solution. Again, could also potentially be verifying those connections uh, through the security certificates and making sure that those are valid. So that is another way that we could potentially do that. Next, determine if connections to external systems are controlled and limited. So now we get more into the functionality of firewalling, maybe away from the idea of certificates and what's allowed, what's not allowed. Now we start getting into what systems as a whole can you get into and not get into. So we may have ports and protocols that are blocked. We may have web filtering that's going on. Again, I would describe what you have in place. But a sample answer might be connections to external systems are controlled limited by the firewall. Another way of describing that could be limited by the endpoint management solution. If you've got something like ThreatLocker, that's how I would probably advocate doing it. Another example is you may be able to utilize any number of blacklisting and whitelisting solutions in there to make sure that the connection to that system is controlled and limited. And finally, determine if the use of external systems is controlled and limited. So can we use it? Is that limited? And again, sample answer is connections to external systems are limited, controlled by the organization's firewall. Ultimately, again, this control is really all about the idea that users shouldn't be granted open internet access if they're going to be working with CUI. It's just a big no-no. And so that's really what this is getting at the heart of is how are you prohibiting those users from just doing whatever they want, including potentially malicious actions that they're not aware of. And that's again really kind of three main tools that I think we're going to look at. One is firewall, one is SIEM, and then of course one is going to definitely be your combination of solutions used as an endpoint protection solution.
Right. And, I think the funny thing about CUI is that for me, um, at least I always have to remind myself that the C in CUI does not stand for classified. In fact, it's control unclassified. But the way that you store uh, CUI and the way that you need to protect it, you almost need to act like it is classified.
Yeah. And having been familiar with secret and top secret type clearances, a lot of when you go into secret and top secret kind of deals with the physical security around it. There's not really a whole lot more security that you could put in for for anything other than what we have in NIST SP 171. You start getting away from technical controls and what you can and can't do, and you start getting into what are the practices and procedures for diligently looking at security on an ongoing and periodic basis.
Hmm.
That's really when you get to higher levels of security, that's what it's all about. It's really all about control. It's about monitoring those systems. It's about being a proactive player when it comes to just getting this stuff, so that security is more proactive than reactive.
Right. So, what are the potential difficulties, if any, in enacting this one, since it's so kind of difficult and there's a lot of wrong information and it's pretty broad?
Yeah, it's great, great question. So, number one is I think you have to have a layered security approach. There has to be multiple solutions that it takes to answer this control. And for a lot of small to mid-sized businesses, they sort of have their basic firewalling in place and they don't have a SIEM solution, right? So they don't have anything that's communicating back to them based on what security events are going on and what's happening. That I think is probably one of the more difficult challenges that I think a lot of companies face is as they go through Control Family 1, they really start to get an idea of what is entailed here, and they realize, wait a minute, I'm going to need a SIEM solution. Sometimes SIEM solutions are very expensive, and I won't name names or vendors, but there are some SIEM solutions out there that are quite expensive. I'll tell you, OnCall has figured out how to get that price down. We figured out some select vendors that we work with periodically where we either get volume discounts for our clients and pass it on, or their solution is just much more reasonably priced. But it is definitely something that the average IT guy who is not a security specialist is going to look at and go, well, I don't really need that. I had a very interesting conversation early on about SIEM solutions with the creators of NIST SP 171. And that's exactly what they said. They said, look, yeah, there's about 30 something controls that are affected by a SIEM solution. There's no way around it. And, once I was sort of told by the people that wrote the document, there's no way around it, then we said, okay, we'll quit trying to find that way around it. It doesn't work. But I think that's one difficulty, right? Because I think the small to mid-sized, and even some of the larger enterprise businesses just don't use the SIEM solution. They don't use security telemetry like a lot of larger enterprise businesses do, and they're required by the standard to do that. I think most people are running firewalls, but a lot of people also don't run firewalls that actually have some of the necessary protections. Intrusion prevention and an active subscription to packet-based threat filtering, in my opinion, is just the basics of good security. And yet we constantly find, passive firewalls, firewalls that are, Best Buy and, Walmart type firewalls. Even in some of these mid-sized networks, it's kind of appalling. Um, and then worse, and this is maybe the biggest offender, is you find devices that are just simply installed and they got it to work and they got internet to flow through it and they never turned on any of the protections or it's configured in default. Those are not unusual for us to find out in the field, particularly if it's our first time looking at it. And we'll go, hey, well, so show us the security configuration. I don't know. I never really configured it. I mean, I bought the thing. Doesn't it just work? And that is really a huge challenge with security, and particularly in meeting what this control calls for. A lot of these devices don't just work out of the box. You have to take them out of the box. You have to sometimes get some vendor support and actually get it set up properly for your environment. If you don't do that, you're not meeting the controls in some cases. So I think that one is also a big time difficulty, all of which can lead to inadequate security. And that's really why this control exists, is without what's here and your ability to control what the end users are doing, you run potential for massive security problems. It's really kind of that simple.
Right. Absolutely. That's extremely valuable information for what can be kind of a confusing control as we get close to wrapping up the access control portion of these controls. And I mentioned that each one of these control families has to do with something very different. in the cybersecurity model. And this first one happens to be access control, which is why most of these control videos or most of these control episodes have focused on what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, accessing mobile devices, that kind of thing. So, with that being said, Mike, these topics can sometimes get a bit dry. So you know what we like to do on this podcast. We like to ask some silly questions at the end just to kind of liven it up and lighten it up a little bit and make it fun for everybody, even if whether they want to take the question seriously or not. But sometimes it ends up taking us to a place where the answer can be a little bit more serious and relatable, and I kind of like that. But and I have to say, today's silly question is a good one, and it came directly from the old rust bucket that rests on top of my shoulders. And it is this: what if the external network that I'm trying to connect to is an alien spaceship trying to make peace for the good of the Earth?
Man, that is a very good question, and I'm not sure exactly how to answer that. Let's see here. Well, I guess the first thing is hopefully there's a firewall between you and that spaceship, right? Who knows? Maybe that firewall might be the U.S. Space Force. I'm not sure. So first thing is you got to have a firewall, and then at some point you got to open up some ports and let some aliens through, I guess. But only under a very very controlled circumstance, I would say, because you just don't know how dangerous aliens could be. I mean, they could be no big deal. They could be harmless. They could be here to do good things.
Have you ever seen the movie Arrival
I
with
have
Amy
not.
Adams
No,
and Jeremy Renner?
I've never seen that movie. No.
It's really good. They try like aliens come to Earth and they try to figure out a way to communicate with them because they're not sure if they can understand English. It's really interesting. You should look it up. Um, in fact, I think I'll watch that later. Um, but like our marketing department this week actually just sent out an email blast about next generation firewalls, and so maybe the aliens have firewall technology that we don't even know about yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's almost really guaranteed. Um, I feel like an alien would have to have some pretty intense technology to just get here.
I mean, maybe it's not a firewall. Maybe it's alien. Maybe it's a plasma wall. I don't know.
In Star Trek, they had shields. I'm not really sure what they were, but they had shields. Maybe, and a shield is like a firewall. It's the same concept.
Yeah, same concept, less fire. And that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving world of defense. We'd like to thank Mike for joining us and talking about the importance of monitoring external connections and that kind of thing, as confusing as it can be. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman. It's great to see you.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these topics and connect with us on our social media channels. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. If you haven't already, what should they do, Mike?
Well, they gotta like it, they gotta subscribe to it, and for sure they gotta tell a friend about it.
Exactly, because if you do all that and you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, you'll know when new episodes like this one are released. And we truly appreciate it if you could rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought provoking episodes and high quality content. Join us next time as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.